I think one of the things that attracted me to Sidewalk Advocates is that we delve deeper into how to have a real dialogue, that it's not just about the headline, it's not just about the clickbait, it's about let's have a conversation so we can really start to understand each other and understand the truth. Because I think it's really easy online in particular to kind of gloss over that because you're in a screen, you're not looking at the person, but there's still a person behind that reading that. Or if we're going to understand how to communicate in this culture, offering up something that is.
Well, howdy, everybody, and welcome to the Laura Muzyka Show. I'm your host, Laura Muzyka, attorney and president CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life. You know, it hit me the other day. Life is messaging. From the 16-year-old who wants to borrow the car from his parents to Martin Luther King Jr. sharing the hope of equality, it feels like, especially as people of faith and conscience, we are selling a message, a hope, a vision everywhere we go. I want to take a moment to talk about how we best share the message of life, arguably the most important conversation in the world today besides faith itself, and how we win people over to our movement with a winsome, efficacious message for the sake of lives and souls. Here's a few verses on that. Colossians 4:6 says, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." The idea is communication should be thoughtful, persuasive, and seasoned with wisdom. 2 Corinthians 5:20 says, "Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God." Messaging matters because we represent Christ. We are his hands and feet, right? And then 1 Peter 3:15 says, "Always be prepared to give a defense to anyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect." Effective communication means truth plus tone. Gentleness and respect matter, right? I have a communications department here at Sidewalk Advocates for Life, the organization and ministry I lead, because I know this firsthand. I am an attorney myself. I'm a persuader by nature, but communications is a little bit of a different flavor. Communication is how we express who we are to the world. It's not just what we do, but how we frame it in truth. It's the intentional sharing of our mission, vision, values, and impact with internal and external audiences in ways that inspire understanding, trust, and action. And it can cover everything from branding, storytelling, marketing, PR, donor relations, advocacy, and even internal staff updates and communication. So, here to share some wisdom with us today, whether we want to know how to do this better as an individual or as an organizational leader, is one of my amazing staff members, Becky Visosky, our communications specialist, one of truly the most brilliant people I have ever known. We have so much wisdom on our team. Indeed, I like to think that I hire the best, right? And I can't wait to unpack this a bit more with her. So, let me go ahead and give you a proper introduction of her. Becky Visosky's passion for the pro-life movement began in 1994 at Louisiana State University, where she helped relaunch the local Students for Life chapter. After college, she went on to earn her JD at the University of Texas School of Law. Becky then settled in Dallas and began volunteering for pro-life ministry, including Project Gabriel, assisting pregnant mothers in need, and as a chastity speaker at local schools and churches. Her commitment grew into full-time work in 2010 when she joined the staff of the Catholic pro-life community, the Respect Life Ministry of the Diocese of Dallas, which is where we first met. She first served the ministry as director of communications and then as executive director, and then she joined us. Before then, Becky had honed her rhetorical skills as a litigation partner at a Dallas law firm. So she's also a recovering attorney like me. Let's go ahead and welcome to the program, Becky Visosky. Hey, Becky, how are you doing this afternoon?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Great to have you. Becky, we have known each other a long time, and our paths have not only intertwined, but also echoed each other a bit. I want to go ahead and just kind of take a moment to go back in time and talk about some of those early days. I'd love for you to share with our audience how you transitioned from practicing law to working in full-time grassroots pro-life work.
Yeah, well, I had come out, as you mentioned, I came out of law school, moved to Dallas, and started as an associate at a law firm. Loved the work, loved the intellectual challenge of being a lawyer. And I had really had on my heart since I was a younger person the pro-life movement.
Mm,
And I actually remember my then fiance, now husband, mentioning we were watching the news, and I was getting worked up about something on the news that had to do with abortion.
mm,
And my husband said it, also an attorney, kind of rhetorically, if people really believe that millions of children are dying, it's kind of shocking they don't do more. And
wow.
that just hit me like a ton of bricks. And he didn't mean it in an accusatory fashion. This is just kind of how my husband talking out loud.
Yeah.
I regularly remind him of this, that he basically started this ball rolling, so it's his fault. But after that, I started looking online to see how I could get more involved, and that's how I found kind of where we both are part of where you started, at the
Yeah.
Catholic pro-life community, because I really loved that they approached pro-life from not just a political lens, but a compassionate lens about helping people, a more holistic lens.
Yeah.
Started volunteering for them, and it just became my passion. And I
Mm,
realized after, practicing law for several years that I thought that's where God is really calling me. And as is often the case, when you open your heart, doors start to open.
yeah. Yeah. So beautiful. I've never forgotten that. The wisdom of your husband and saying, gosh, if this really is the Holocaust that it is, why aren't more people doing more? Right. And some of us are called to it full time, but I believe everybody at least is called to play some sort of role in the greatest human rights movement on earth. I've often said that this is such a battle that it may be that we need to think about what not to do, right? Rather than what to do. In other words, we're called to give so much of our time, talent, and treasure with this being what it is. And I'm so grateful that you're an example in that and to ask that question. I want to ask about how your personal life and your communications work, even here at Sidewalk Advocates for Life now, intersect. How do your experiences inform your communications work and vice versa?
Mhm, mhm. Well, I think naturally, coming from a legal background, I mean, you're really taught to kind of how to persuasively speak and write for a living.
Mm,
So there was a natural bridge for me as a communicator,
yeah.
kind of bringing a lot of those same skills to bear. Also, I think too, learning how to analytically think, because in our culture where
Mm,
there's a lot of knee jerk emotional reactions, it's all about kind of the clickbait. I think one of the things that both where I worked before and one of the things that attracted me to Sidewalk Advocates is that we delve deeper into how to have a real dialogue, that it's not just about the headline, it's not just about the clickbait, it's about let's have a conversation so we can really start to understand each other and understand the truth. And that's has spoken to me, both in personal interactions and then, of course, as a professional. I mean, it's become the central part of what I do. As you mentioned, I was moved into an executive director position, and I loved having the opportunity of leadership. But my heart has always been as a communicator. So I've really enjoyed being able to kind of come back to that.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and that leads right into the next question. Knowing that we're in such a weird place in our nation and our world right now, there's so much conflict over this issue and so much more. Tension is high, emotional temperature is so high. It can be hard to make ourselves heard among people who disagree with us, right? So, how do you respond to that challenge? And what would you tell our audience is the best way to respond?
Well, I would say first and foremost, understanding your audience
Hmm.
and your own humility in the conversation.
Yeah.
I think knowing who your audience is and saying, okay, where are they coming from? And truly trying to have an empathetic eye towards what's bringing them to this place. Because in my experience, most of the people that I deal with, both personally and professionally, they don't have evil machinations. Even if they agree with things or profess things that I might find distasteful, even if they do support abortion, most people think that they're doing right by women by making that, by, embracing that position. And now you can always say there's people that are out for profit, the broader industry of abortion,
Yeah.
hands down, the fact that there is a money making machine behind abortion is evil. But when you're communicating with individuals, I think understanding that people have their own perspective, their own motivations, it's really important to, I think through that when you're having a conversation, whether that's in person or online, because I think it's really easy online in particular to kind of gloss over that because you're in a screen, you're not looking at the person, but there's still a
Yeah.
person behind that reading that. And if you
Right.
don't invite a compassionate conversation, an understanding conversation, what's the point? Because you're just going to put up more walls. And then we're just talking to ourselves, which
Yeah.
isn't moving the cultural needle at all.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. And it can be hard to stay calm when we're looking at the other side and going, your perspective, we might feel, is insane, right? And I'm sure sometimes they think that about us. It can be
Mm-hmm.
hard to hold ourselves together and to try to see that there's a person on the other side that is coming to the table with certain experiences or wounds or maybe confusion or, there's something they don't understand, right? And it doesn't seem like it gets us anywhere to demonize the other side rather than first trying to understand and invite dialogue. So important. What do you do when there are really ugly responses, Becky, to something that you put out on social media or email or other communications? Because even though I know people look at us in Sidewalk Advocates for Life and say, oh, I see a lot of nice people on the sidewalk, which we are, we speak truth, but we do it with a lot of love. We do it through resources and options and compassion, which we believe is the most effective way to win someone's heart to life, a decision to life. What do you do when you are met with such ugliness? How do you respond, and what do you do to prevent burnout even from that?
Yeah. Well, I have just complete admiration for advocates who are face to face sometimes with that hostility, because that is an even
Mm,
greater challenge than where you're kind of once removed from it as a professional communicator behind the screen or, behind the writing.
yeah,
I would say for me, the biggest thing is taking a breath. Maybe that
yeah.
means stepping away from the
Mm,
conversation. I have found more than once where I have literally typed out a response on social media and then deleted it. Because sometimes I just need to get it out of my system and then go, is this really going to advance the conversation? And
mm,
sometimes it means not responding at all. A
yeah,
lot of times on social media, I tend to err towards that because if I'm going to engage in an argument, I want to weigh, first of all, is that person open to that conversation? Is this the best platform for that conversation? Should I consider a direct message? If it's a
yeah,
personal friend, maybe I pick up a phone, that type of thing. And then I think part of that too is when you message a response, instead of just saying, here's what I think,
yeah,
here's what you should think, I think often putting links, inviting them into here's what's been persuasive to me. Even on my own page, if I put up anything about a position, when I'm not putting up fun pictures about family or something like that, nine
mm,
times out of 10, I'm posting an article I thought was interesting or a fact, some information that I thought was interesting, as opposed to here's what I think. Because honestly, there's enough of that out in social media.
yeah.
I'm much more interested in inviting people into, hey, I found this interesting. Did you?
Yeah, yeah, just kind of planting seeds and inviting them to
Mhm.
consider something rather than shoving it down their throat, right? It's important. In your course of your work with us and anywhere else in the movement, has there been a story or encounter that has really impacted you personally? And what has story done for you, and what have you seen it do for others as well?
Well, I've say it since working with sidewalk advocates, I think the opportunity to engage with people who have been in the abortion industry has
Mm,
been the most impactful for me.
yeah,
Because I think before coming to sidewalk advocates, I had read, about those encounters, about those experiences, but I hadn't had those first person relationships. And I think that's just empowered me more about, in my hope, my personal mission to really engage in dialogue, to figure out what brings people on the journey they have and how can we effectively make connections. I'd say before being with sidewalk advocates, kind of one of the most sort of powerful experiences for me on the sidewalk was I was out there for a prayer event. And I remember a woman coming up with her young boy, who was probably 8 or 9. They're just walking down the street. They weren't part of the event. And she walked up to me and she asked her son to kind of step back a little bit. And she just said, I
Mm.
just wanted to let you know he's here because you all were here.
Wow.
And and I know for many of our sidewalk advocates out there, they have these experiences regularly. But as someone who sits back in admiration of those that are the ones who reach out in advocacy, I've been a prayer partner and a prayer support. Having that moment, that direct moment with a mother was just so incredibly powerful. And to then see the visual of a walking, talking child that's going to school, that's with his mom, and just a moment of like asking him to step back because she didn't want him to be a part of the conversation, but felt
Mm.
compelled to share that. I just thought was amazing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And what do you think are really the power of stories in being able to win people over to our side? Like, let's talk about that for just a moment. Storytelling, I know, is particularly powerful. I believe in Revelation, it says they conquered him by the blood of the lamb and the word of their testimony. In other words, their own personal story, which it seems it's really hard for the other side to argue with, right? So how have you seen story or experience really win people over?
Well, I mean, I think honestly, it's the best form of persuasive communication we can offer. I mean,
Yeah.
whether it's someone who's had an abortion, whether it's someone who's been in the abortion industry, whether it's someone just talking about their testimony and what brought them to where they're at. I think, in a world where unfortunately, hostility seems to run hot, when we
Mm,
can step back and say, here's just my experience I want to share with you, it makes people more real.
yeah.
It offers that point of connection. And honestly, I think because we tend to live in a culture that can be a little bit more emotional, where we hear a lot about, that's your truth and you have to respect your truth. Now, I may take issues with the fact that there's a your truth and a my truth,
Yeah.
but at least in this culture, if we're going to understand how to communicate in this culture, offering up something that is genuine
Yeah.
in this culture, I think is valued. When you say genuinely, this is what I experienced, it's less likely, I think, to be questioned as just rhetoric, or propaganda. Now, that's not always the case. Gosh knows we've seen that where we've offered truth online and people said, "Oh, it's just not. I don't believe it." Even when we've had
Right.
videos, and frankly, you can't do anything about that. But
Yeah.
I think for every vocal person you hear who's saying that, you've
Yeah.
got hundreds who are absorbing that truth. And honestly, I mean, heck, it's biblical. I mean, there's a reason why Jesus talked in parables. He didn't just get up there
Yeah.
and teach in a didactic way. I think it's what
Mm,
speaks to our hearts on the
yeah.
most basic level.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think nobody knows us better than our Lord, right? And they say the human brain is often um we're disposed to story and we can garner lessons better from that. We can understand things better with analogies and with story. And so, yeah, I would just encourage anybody and everybody out there, especially if you lead a ministry and organization, if you're appealing to ministry partners, to donors, like being able to share these real human stories. It's captivating
Absolutely.
for any audience, right? And it does blow my mind when we put out a real human story and the other side is like, I don't believe that. I don't believe that that's possible. Like, when we put out into the world Maria's story, this mom, Texas mom that we helped who had a fully funded abortion to Washington, D.C., and we're saying 26 weeks, like she had a fully funded abortion at 26 weeks in Washington, D.C. Of course, we caught her just a few days before she actually made that journey. But to watch people on TikTok saying, that's ridiculous. Late term abortion doesn't exist in America, almost like putting their fingers in their ears and saying, I don't want to hear this. Right. And that's hard. Like, how do we get around that? Do you have any thoughts on that, Becky? Like, what do we do when people aren't even
Yeah.
willing to listen to some of these real stories?
Well, I think part of it, and it's funny you mentioned that because we've even talked about it in our communications department,
Yeah.
about how do we kind of continue to have a compassionate, truthful voice, excuse me, in the face of some of that hostility. I think one thing we have to be careful about is, unfortunately, in the technological world we live in,
Mm.
sometimes that's literally bots that are responding.
Mm.
And I'm by no means a conspiracy theorist, but you can go back and actually trace back some of these accounts
Yeah.
and see that that isn't a real person who's trying to engage with you. that is either some type of computerized type response, or it's an organization that's running that particular account, and they're pushing out those responses. A lot of times you can see if it's the same person.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think we have to take those kind of responses with a grain of salt. And then I think we have to just understand that we're not going to change everybody's mind on social media.
Yeah.
People don't, in my experience, often go to online platforms like that. If they're engaged in an argument, they're coming to the table with, I've already made up my mind. And
Yeah.
I just want to voice that opinion on you and put that out there into the universe and into the conversation. But the
Yeah.
important thing, and I think our social media coordinator does it well, is coming in at the right time with the little bits of truth that really aren't about convincing the person who's been so hostile, but putting those truth and seeds out there for the people that are watching the conversation.
Yeah.
Because there is that where I think as long as we stay calm, as long as we stay loving, we stay Christ-like, and we just stay committed to the truth, with humility and sometimes with more of a conservative approach. You're not firing back into the argument with every step of the way, because that's going to exhaust you and it's not going to achieve anything. But I think if we
Yeah.
have that kind of moderate approach, the people watching the conversation are understanding what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and I've even seen it on the sidewalk when we're trying to quote unquote convince an abortion worker to leave. Sometimes you do feel like you're planting seeds in front of a brick wall, right? But you often hear later that each seed that was planted, somebody watered that. It started to grow and it eventually bore fruit. And that's what I think of too, is that sometimes when we feel like we're not really getting anywhere, um, something is stirring in their heart and mind. And only God can do that. Only they can allow that, right? But
Mhm.
our part is not to convert people. We don't have that power, but we have the ability to plant seeds and be a powerful witness. And like you've said so well, if we can keep our cool and not get dragged into the knockdown fight over it, right? Then we have the ability to invite dialogue when they're ready to listen. Is that fair?
No, I think that makes complete sense, because
Yeah.
I think, like I said, whether or not, you hope and you pray that you're going to make a connection with that person who's really hostile. But you
Mhm.
have no idea how many people you might be making, some type of connection with, who
Yeah.
aren't even directly responding to the conversation,
Right. Right. No.
particularly in an online world.
Absolutely, absolutely. People are watching, and I've even had people come back to me years later and say, "Hey, that conversation, that friendly debate that you had with that person on your Facebook wall, that was really instructive for me, and I knew how to respond better to my friend or neighbor on that particular
Mhm.
topic." Right? So you never know who you're affecting. So, and I've often found too that the people that are hottest, the people that want to fire back at you, it's because something is stirring, right? Something is stirring. I know that my old boss, David B. Wright, who founded 40 Days for Life, when I worked for their effort for a couple of years on the national team, he would often say that, with what we're doing, we're creating the constructive tension that's needed for abortion to end. And without that constructive tension that actually can bring about change, we don't have hope of conversion. He said, I'm more worried about the ones that seem apathetic than the ones that are fiery and hot, right? We've seen that on the front
Right?
lines. Yeah.
C.S. Lewis made the same point about kind of our Christian walk, is
Mm,
that at the minimum, we need to treat the question with the importance that it deserves.
yeah.
Whether you're against it or for it, belief or not belief, treat the question with the importance it deserves. It's funny you mentioned this, because we had years back, I did an interview with an international press organization, and they were just floored at how big of an issue abortion was in the presidential election,
Mm,
because in their country, abortion was part of government health care. So it was just a given. And they were having an election coming up, and they said, we couldn't even tell you where our candidates stand on abortion. No one talks about it. And I thought, what a blessing. For as hostile as it seems in our country, it is still a conversation. And
yeah.
so, if nothing else, the fact that we keep talking about it, the fact that we keep making people take a look at it, understand it, putting the truth in front of them in a loving way. I think if we do nothing else, I think that's an answer to the call of what the gospel of life is asking for us.
Yeah, yeah. And I think about just the witness of one person. We look at our friend Charlie Kirk, who was gunned down by a madman, the co-founder and leader of Turning Point USA, right? And, his witness. And then with his passing, so many people suddenly having the confidence to dialogue more and to speak up and so forth, right? Even just the witness of that very act of dialogue really has moved so many people to say, you know what? We need to keep having the conversation. It matters. It is making a difference and it is winning hearts and minds. And sometimes it might take a long time to win some of those hearts and minds. But again, you never know in the wake of that who you're affecting. It's so important. Um, Becky, for our audience, some of whom may be leaders or working in ministry, and sharing some of these communication challenges, what's the one thing you would recommend they keep in mind, or a couple things that you recommend they keep in mind as they get their message out there?
Well, I would say, first and foremost, crystallize what you're trying to communicate. Look at your
Mm,
mission and crystallize what's your elevator speech.
yeah,
At your bare bones, what are you trying to communicate? And that doesn't mean you're going to use the same words every time, but if you know what your through message is, it's going to drive everything you say after that.
yeah,
And then define who is our primary audience, because you can't be all things to all people. I
yeah,
think you need to figure out, who is it that I'm trying to serve? Who is it that I'm trying to bring to the table? Now, that might be different things in different areas. Like for us, being on the sidewalk with a mom versus being on social. But I would say for us, we use a lot of the same communication skills
yeah.
because we want to have a certain tone to our communication. We want to have a certain through message. And I think it's really important to kind of take that big picture before you start just talking, because then I think it's harder to have that kind of universal footprint where people say, "Oh, that's a sidewalk advocate's message,"
Mhm.
because it's consistent. I think sometimes when we think of brand, we think of, oh, the logo, oh, the colors. It's so much bigger than that.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I think really kind of thinking through that as a leader, and then evaluating what are the best places to get that message out to best reach your target audiences. Because right now we are overblown by mediums, you know, but not every
mm,
medium is for every person, you know.
yeah,
If you're a church, I think figuring out, okay, I want to, talk in a bulletin. I want to maybe have a Facebook page. Do I really need a TikTok page? Is that where my congregation's at? Versus Students for Life, yes, they're going to be on TikTok, So I think not less is more. Just,
yeah.
really thinking about what's effective, working smarter to get a consistent message out to your, target audience.
Yeah, and I think you're so right on. Brand is really important. Like you said, sometimes people think of branding as logo and colors, and that's an important part of brand. But my favorite definition of brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room, right? Are you consistently who you say you are? Who do you want to be out in the world? I remember a communications consultant saying to me, if you don't tell your story, someone else is going to, right? So, how are you telling your story? What are you inviting in? What is your mission and vision in the world, right? How are you communicating that? All those things. And then the way that you're doing that through the core values that you have. One of the biggest compliments I know that somebody gave me this past week is they said, every single one of your team members is the same. They're loving, they're Christ-like, and I would say that about our sidewalk advocates on the sidewalk. We have a certain set of core values that our national team abides by, that we ask our sidewalk advocates to abide by. We ask them to sign a pledge of integrity. This is who I am on the sidewalk, at least while I'm volunteering with Sidewalk Advocates for Life. So, so important. The other thing that comes to mind too, I remember in a media training, one of the instructors saying, when you go to open a can of Coke, you expect to get Coke. So don't mix it with anything else, right? And so again, it's so important. Identity is so important in this space. Who are you? Especially when you're getting vitriol and you're getting ugliness from the other side, remembering still who you are and whose you are. I mean, I feel like that's such an important part of our journey here, right? So good.
Well, and it would be such a disconnect for us when our big point is we are a compassionate voice on the sidewalk. Well, if you came to our Facebook page and we were snarky, And,
Yeah.
there would be a disconnect. And now I'm not saying there's not a place in social media to be the edgy comedian, for an issue to get across a point. And we can tiptoe around those areas to be cute, to be edgy.
Sure.
But I think we have to always think through, is that consistent with the overall vision we're trying to give people, particularly knowing that on social, we're not just reaching out to supporters. We're reaching out to people who are looking for the holes. They're already
Yeah.
coming to the table assuming things about us. And if we're trying to say, hey, we are the compassionate ones, we are the peaceful ones, we're the ones that are speaking peace into crisis,
Yeah.
we can't then go out into the broader culture chaotically, because
Yeah.
that creates an inconsistency. And I think in this world, that is honestly, this is not new, but even more so now when there's so many ways you can be viewed. It's kind of a recipe for disaster if you're inconsistent.
Yeah. One more question. What do you see as kind of the new communications style or medium that's coming out right now? Maybe it's something that scares you, or maybe it's something that you're excited about that you think people could make more use of going forward to get their message out.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's not new in so much as it's been around a while, but I think it is still a major medium is video.
Yeah.
I think what is new is the ability to do that in-house. I have seen
Mm,
that even in the last 10 years, since becoming a professional communicator, and the ability to do a video for social media. Now, obviously, there's definitely a place when you're going to do polished ministry videos and things like that, where bringing in a professional, that all makes sense. You're going to put out tutorials, training videos, all makes sense. But just taking that moment, if you're in an organization, for one of your leaders to get in front of their cell phone and give that personal testimony, that
mm,
personal reason why they're called to the mission, a donor, that personal reason why they're giving. I think that helps us get past the veneer of social media where nobody seems real. We can say whatever we want to say. I think bringing a little bit of that genuineness,
mm.
um, we're seeing more of that. I think it's a very powerful tool. I'd say the flip side of that, while it does have its value, and it remains to be seen how that's going to be developed, is AI kind of can take a step away from that genuineness.
Yeah.
The fact that you can create video, the fact that you can create photos, that aren't genuine, I think we're going to struggle with that.
Yeah.
And I would just express caution as we kind of dip our toes into that. I think we are going to see more of it. So ignoring it's not going to work. I
Yeah.
just think, like anything else, we need to be cautious. When you see those AI summaries on the internet, think twice about, okay, what are they sourcing?
Yeah.
Take that extra time. And we do try to do that for those that, follow our social media, make sure that they're getting a more in-depth view on the issues. But, we already have a culture that tends to only read the headlines. And now basically we have, you get online and you do a search, and that's effectively what you're getting,
Yeah.
is a summary of headlines. So I would just express caution.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm already seeing posts, for example, on Facebook where people are like, is this AI? Is this real? We're all already having to test what's authentic and what's not. And sometimes people are putting music out there with an artist voice that they never sang, right? Um, I've even seen some scary videos that people said, this came out in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, with from Turning Point USA, just put it out, and lo and behold, it was fake, right? So we're already having to deal with this. And we're kind of living in a scary world where now we're going to have to defend ourselves and say, like, I didn't put that video out. I didn't sing that. I didn't say that. And again, people are hungry for the truth. They're hungry for the truth. And so we're going to need to figure out how to fight that, definitely, in the
Well,
coming months and years. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, we also have, unfortunately, bad actors
Yeah.
that will take advantage of those opportunities where, if we're already tempted to demonize the other side, we can see situations where messages get put out, videos get put out that, that are just going to continue to foster that type of division. And then at the end of the day, I think you just have to ask yourself, is that really what that person said? Even beyond AI, you look at headlines. I don't know how many times I've read a headline and then I've gone and read the article and I'm like, okay, that's not really what they said.
Yeah.
And sadly, I think both sides of the political sphere does that because media is ultimately out there to make money,
Yeah.
and no matter where they are on the political spectrum, they need views, they need clicks, and so I think making sure that it's incumbent upon us to be informed and to not just stop at the headline, stop at the picture, stop at the video that seems a little off. Really look and see, okay, is this the truth before you dive into, oh, I'm taking this side or this person is awful.
Right. Yeah. And that's why brand is going to be so important in the coming days too. Wow. Well, this has been a great discussion, Becky. I mean, we could talk about this all day, every day, but I know that just the little bits of wisdom that you've put out there are going to help so many people. Hey, let's do a shameless pitch for people finding us at Sidewalk Advocates for Life. So where can people go to start, join, give, or pray and join our team, get to the sidewalk, give of their precious treasure, or join our prayer group? Where would you send them?
Well, first and foremost, our website, sidewalkadvocates.org. And you can pretty much find us on most social media platforms at Sidewalk Advocates for Life. And then, of course, you can find Lauren's show on all of our podcast outlets. But we'd love you to come to the website and sign up for our emails so we can connect with you directly and share with you some of the amazing stories that are coming off the sidewalk.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. All right. Well, Becky, thank you for your endless wisdom. Really appreciate you being here today. And yeah, onward and upward as we look to save lives and to end abortion. Thank you so much.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay. Such wisdom. So good, Becky. Closing thought. Communications is a key component in any organization. We have to get the word out about our mission to attract new supporters, donors, customers, people to help us grow our organization and expand our reach. But more than that, communication is at the heart of the relationships we have with others. So I just invite you to think of a time where you shared a challenge or a victory with someone you cared about. Think of a time when someone shared a sorrow or a disappointment with you. Recall how many different times, how many different ways someone has told you that they loved you. Reflect on the phrasing or the tone of voice of hurtful remarks that still rankle in your heart today, right? Communication has such impact. In today's fraught and angsty society, good communication is more important than ever, even when it seems to us that people are not very good listeners to the messages we're putting out. After all, that is not a contemporary condition. Proverbs 18:13 could have been guidance for any of today's social media users. It says, whoever answers before listening, there is folly and shame. And that makes our own approach, our tone, our word choice, the images and stories we share absolutely key. As in any facet of ministry, we understand that we may never know this side of heaven how many people heard our voices or read our posts and felt their hearts soften. All we can do is persist in planting seeds, sharing the truth in love, turning away wrath with a soft answer, and approaching each interaction graciously. As Paul says in his letter to the Ephesians, be kind to one another, compassionate, forgiving one another as God has forgiven you in Christ. The way we do things, the way we say things, our tone, our approach, understanding our audience, it matters. It matters in winning lives and souls to the kingdom. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining me for another episode of the Lauren Muzyka Show. We'll be back here next Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central on the Sidewalk Advocates for Life Facebook page, YouTube channel, or wherever you get podcasts. Thanks so much, everybody.